Okay, if you're a parent or a high school student, you know this feeling. That mix of excitement and, let's be honest, pure panic when you start thinking about college applications. It just feels like this giant, complicated maze, right? With super high stakes at every single turn. So let's dive in and see if we can map out a clearer path forward. At its heart, the problem is pretty simple. The whole process is just massive, it's incredibly competitive, and most students are out there trying to figure it out without any kind of personalized map. The sheer scale of it all, well, it can feel impossible to tackle on your own. And this chart, wow, this chart tells you everything you need to know in just 2 bars. You see, the American School Counselor Association says the ideal ratio is 250 students for every one counselor. But then you look at a state like California, and the average is 482 to 1. That's nearly double. That is a huge gap in personal support for these kids. So what happens when you have a support gap that big? Well, this is what you get. Students are left feeling totally stressed out, underprepared, and just kind of thrown into this sea of other applicants with no real plan for how to stand out from the crowd. This brings us to the first massive hurdle, strategy. Because getting into college these days, it is so much more than just filling out a form correctly. You've got to think of it like a multi-year game of chess, and you absolutely need a deliberate, effective plan to win. So that leads to a really direct question for you. What's your game plan? Seriously, are you actively thinking about strategies to increase your chances, or are you just sort of going through the motions? It's a tough question, but it's one you've got to ask right at the beginning. You see, a really successful strategy goes way beyond just getting an acceptance letter. I mean, yeah, it's about increasing your odds, of course, but it's also about finding the right schools for you, understanding all your options, not just the famous ones, and figuring out how to tell your story in a way that makes you memorable. That's the whole shebang. And then, of course, we have to talk about the other giant in the room, money. The financial puzzle of paying for college can be every bit as confusing and stressful as the admissions part, so let's try and crack that code a little bit. Here's another key question for you. What's your financial strategy? You know, a really common mistake is thinking that financial aid is only for families who have a super low income. But that's just not the whole story. There are all kinds of strategies for getting scholarships and grants, no matter what your family's income is. Okay, to even get started on the money side, you have to learn the language. It's a total alphabet soup of acronyms. Let's just quickly break down the big ones, starting with the FAFSA. That's the free application for federal student aid. It is the absolute starting line for any federal money, grants, loans, you name it. Then, a lot of private colleges will ask for something called the CSS profile. The easiest way to think about it is like the FAFSA's nosier, more detailed cousin. It asks more questions so the schools can decide how to give out their own money, cash that comes directly from them. All right, so once you fill out that FAFSA, it spits out this really important number, the SAI, or Student Aid Index. This is a new term, by the way. It used to be called the EFC. But basically, this is the magic number colleges use to figure out how much federal aid you're eligible for. And the final piece of the money puzzle is the COA, the cost of attendance. Now, it's so important to understand this isn't just tuition, not by a long shot. This is the full sticker price. Tuition, fees, room and board, books, even travel. It's the total, all-in number before any financial aid gets applied. So, with this ridiculously complex maze of strategy and finance, where do people turn? Well, some families are deciding they need a personal guide, an admissions consultant, to help them navigate the whole thing from start to finish. So, what does that kind of guidance actually look like? Well, it tends to be a step-by-step process. It all kicks off with building that personal strategy we talked about. Then it moves into hands-on help with the actual applications and essays, navigating all those financial forms we just defined, and can even go as far as helping you negotiate with colleges for a better financial aid package. But the big question is, does it work? Let's take a look at the kind of results these services claim to get, both in the hard data of who gets in and in that softer but just as important metric of how much stress it relieves. 95%. That's a big, bold number, right? Just kind of hangs there. But what does it actually mean? Well, according to the source, that number means that over 95% of these students get into at least 3 of their top 5 college choices. Now that's a pretty big deal. It suggests a process that ends with having multiple great options on the table. But you know, it goes beyond the stats. There's the emotional side of it. The feedback from families often centers on this incredible sense of relief. Just take this one from a parent, Rhonda, who said the help during a, quote, very overwhelming and emotional time was a lifesaver. And that theme just keeps popping up. Another person, Yigal, brings us right back to that maze idea we started with. He talks about the value of having someone who can simplify the mess of red tape and just be a consistent guide through it all. And this last one from William, this really gets to the practical stuff. It's not just about feelings, it's about real-world results. Getting help to prioritize, getting your finances straight, and just making the whole process more efficient. Basically, turning chaos into an actual manageable plan. So when you look at all of it together, the strategy, the crazy finances, the results, the real thing these services seem to be offering boils down to one simple, powerful thing. It's not just about getting in or getting money, it's about delivering peace of mind. And that's really the thought I want to leave you with. Whether you get help or you decide to go it alone, what would give you peace of mind on this journey? What would it take to turn that feeling of being totally lost in a maze into a feeling of confidence, knowing you're on the right path?